They tried to control the narrative by surrounding your existence with invisible boundaries, hoping to contain what they could never understand. But now, everything they've constructed is buckling under the pressure of what they feared most: exposure. Not by storm, not by fire, but by a silent unraveling, the kind that begins within the systems they once thought were impenetrable. Their illusion of dominance is slipping like sand through fractured glass. What was once an invisible web of control is now a tangled mess collapsing under its own weight. And while they scramble to patch the cracks, something older than memory and deeper than blood is rising to the surface. The origin they've buried under forged documents and manipulated history is beginning to speak, and its voice is not asking for permission. Somewhere, behind locked doors and panicked whispers, entire strategies are being rewritten because one life, yours, refuses to disappear. Some thought their silent war against you would go unnoticed, but the very systems they built to watch are now turning inward, recording their own collapse in real time. The unraveling doesn't begin with thunder. It starts with whispers from those who once smiled beside you, now unable to bear the weight of their own betrayal. What was once aimed at your destruction is now folding back on them with surgical precision. These weren't harmless curses or fleeting malice. They were deep, corrosive intentions engineered to erode your spirit from the inside. But energy doesn't vanish. It circles. And now the very people who once orchestrated your downfall are being eaten alive by their own designs. Across oceans and borders, the same pattern is emerging. Architects of spiritual sabotage are watching their lives spiral into disarray. Elaborate protections are dissolving mid-incantation. Their minds, once sharp and methodical, are now fracturing under unseen pressures, as their illusions crumble without explanation. What they summoned to harm is refusing to leave, not because it's loyal, but because it now finds them suitable hosts. Those who tampered with forces they couldn't fully command are being caged within the very rituals they performed. They've become collateral damage in a war they believed they were winning. But the most disturbing betrayal didn't arrive from strangers or foreign hands. It came wrapped in familiarity. The ones who raised you under the guise of kinship weren't protecting your light, they were feeding from it. Their presence wasn't coincidence. It was design. They were never your roots, just actors assigned to bury them. What lives inside you was never meant to blend in. It was meant to remain hidden until the right vibration called it awake. The story they told you about where you come from was crafted with surgical care, not to inform, but to obscure. The truth wasn't lost. It was buried beneath identities you never chose, among documents that rewrite legacies in ink that bleeds lies. Every trait they couldn't replicate became a threat they had to suppress. Every echo of power in your body became a target for imitation through arcane procedures and engineered rituals meant to extract what they could never truly access. But origin isn't something you can bottle. It's a code embedded in silence, waiting for the right moment to activate itself without warning. What they tried to erase, they unintentionally preserved. In sealing off your past, they locked away the very key to your future. And now that key is turning. Lineages once marked for extinction are flickering back to life through you, not in grandeur, but in the quiet certainty of unshakable knowing. All this has been tracked, not by curiosity, but by a relentless need to contain. Their eyes don't blink, and their ears don't rest. But their hunger to monitor has created a network so sprawling it's beginning to tangle in its own wires. Familiar places, once meant for everyday errands, were never casual. The person holding the door, the one stocking the shelf, all played their part in a script you were never allowed to read. But control breeds oversight. And in their obsession with watching, they overlooked the most important detail. Energy doesn't just flow one way. What they planted to weaken you has begun to distort their own systems. The trap they built has started echoing frequencies they can't decode, because what you carry was never meant for containment. They never intended to erase you with violence, only to erode your clarity one layer at a time. The plan wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. A steady dulling of inner awareness masked as routine life. Products introduced into your home were never chosen by accident. Formulas engineered to blur the sharpness of your intuition, dull your fire, and keep your perception in a constant state of low-frequency static. Beneath this veneer of normalcy, however, larger gears have been turning. While minor players carried out the surface-level obstructions, high-level operatives were drafting the blueprint for a deeper theft, not of your body, but of your birthright. In quiet legal chambers and sealed records, your legacy was being rewritten in ink and silence. Entire courtrooms were repurposed as rituals of erasure. Papers bearing your signature were locked in archives you weren't meant to discover. Testimonies fabricated. Outcomes predetermined. And behind closed doors, they filed documents that claimed you were no longer among the living. A phantom on paper, stripped of all rights but burdened with none of the protection such a status should offer. Theft, masked as paperwork, enabled them to funnel resources that were never theirs. Homes you should have lived in, support you should have received, accounts that carried your name but none of your awareness. Through a fog of manufactured identity, they constructed a legal phantom to siphon everything you were meant to inherit. But what they didn't account for was that your real inheritance could never be housed in bank vaults or filed in ledgers. It's encoded in your breath, your cellular memory, your vision. What you carry isn't learned, it's remembered. Ancient systems of consciousness seated in your DNA now stir. Practices once whispered in temples long gone are rising to the surface of your awareness, reactivating gifts they failed to destroy because they never understood them. And the bond that threatens their entire construct isn't one of romance, but of mirror. A spiritual counterpart exists whose very frequency destabilizes their mechanisms. Not through rebellion, but through undeniable resonance. When a sacred connection begins to activate, those who rely on division move quickly to interrupt its emergence. The counterpart meant to align with your soul's rhythm has been deliberately entangled in a maze of false obligations and fabricated contracts. The disruption isn't rooted in personal tension. It's engineered sabotage, calculated to fracture the blueprint of a union that would dismantle entire layers of energetic control. That desperation has begun to expose itself through unguarded trails and overlooked details. Behind locked storage units and abandoned safe houses, evidence has surfaced that defies explanation. Symbols etched into stone, traces of forbidden rites, reports of children disappearing under circumstances that dissolve upon inquiry. Institutions long trusted by the public have been functioning as cloaks, concealing programs that dissect, categorize, and exploit young souls for purposes far removed from compassion. The focus of this machinery has always been the exceptional, those born with sensitivities that can't be taught. These children are marked not by behavior, but by resonance. And once identified, they are drawn into systems masked as support, where their essence is quietly extracted and repurposed for practitioners who could never generate such power on their own. These operations are buried inside programs the public would never question, serene on the surface, but emptying light beneath. At the center of this disruption stands a figure cloaked in corrupted charisma, someone infected with energies meant to spread, not heal. What he couldn't extract through seduction, he now tries to claim through chaos. His anger isn't emotional, it's strategic. Every failed manipulation has pushed him closer to assembling networks of compliance built on rage, shame, and reward. The gatherings happening nearby aren't about fellowship. They're engines of coordination, spaces where instructions are handed down and resources are redistributed. But their schemes are growing frantic. The alignment they tried to prevent is no longer theoretical, it's imminent. And with every failed attempt to control it, their grip weakens. When a soul carries a frequency that can't be bought, copied, or controlled, enemies resort to tactics beyond the visible. Coordinated from fortified spaces under the illusion of legitimacy, Highly trained manipulators have begun merging obscure sciences with arcane engineering to breach thresholds around your existence. They've mapped out time loops and energy corridors to launch precision assaults, not to destroy your body, but to fracture your will. These operations aren't run by amateurs. They involve consultants with deep access to political protection, tech-enhanced spells disguised as neurological treatments, and signal-based manipulation masked as environmental interference. What they're unleashing is a hybrid war, a mix of ancient intentions with future-facing weaponry, engineered for one purpose: to prevent your emergence. But their formulas fail at one point they can't decode: the ancestral imprint that shields you. Long before their schemes were drafted, an intelligence older than any manual began watching over your path. And now, one of its fiercest protectors has returned, not as memory, but as force. Her presence isn't a sentimental visitation. It's a reset. A consciousness that left the world carrying encrypted truths has now re-entered it fully authorized to dismantle every distortion. She arrives not alone, but as part of a spiritual tribunal that spans cultures and lifetimes. Individuals who once walked as oracles, defenders, and spiritual strategists, now converging for the reclamation of what was hidden. This coalition doesn't operate with spells or modern diagrams. Their methods were carved into stars and sung through bone. They bring no warnings, only correction. What the modern sorcerers call power, they call entry-level understanding. What the elite fear most isn't your resistance. It's the inevitability of what's been awakened inside you. Because each targeted strike now triggers unseen consequences. Not retaliation. Realignment. And in this order of divine law, every act against your being echoes back with exact precision. Not by accident, but by design. Their fight isn't with a person. It's with an instruction written into existence itself. They underestimated the magnitude of silence when it comes from alignment. One focused night of communion, untouched by distraction or fear, sent out a pulse that dismantled years of constructed interference. Without a single word spoken, the vibration of that solitary moment is still unraveling their infrastructure, not by confrontation, but by frequency incompatibility. The systems they spent decades perfecting, legal traps, financial diversions, surveillance webs, are now disintegrating in accelerated time. Their maps weren't built to withstand consciousness that doesn't obey their geometry. And the abundance they tried to hold hostage wasn't currency. It was the architecture of a purpose they cannot predict or block. That incoming provision isn't indulgence. It's deployment. Once rerouted resources flow where they were always meant to go, entire branches of manipulation will dry up overnight. Coordinated operations are already exposing the seams of their most trusted networks, dismantling illusions they believed were airtight. Hidden fronts are folding. Protected spaces are breached. Not by scandal, but by saturation of truth. And the exposure is deeper than headlines. Their accounts are vanishing into governmental lockdowns, their aliases crumbling under biometric data, their carefully constructed backstories being cross-referenced into oblivion. What once passed as legitimate lineage is now being peeled open through forensic scrutiny that doesn't stop at paperwork. It traces vibration, intent, and the energy trail left behind by deception. But divine strategy doesn't end at bureaucracy. The routes laid out to harm you are no longer navigable. Tires blow before engines start. Flights cancel without warning. Coordinators fall ill hours before executing planned intrusions. And the ones meant to observe you from a distance are now entangled in a chaos they can't trace back to anything logical. This isn't coincidence. It's divine intervention running on precision protocols, not to punish, but to interrupt. And when disruption is guided by higher intelligence, there are no accidents, only outcomes. Not everyone makes it back from the kind of inner storms you've survived. And those who do often find the world too shallow to hold the weight of what they've witnessed. That's why a space had to be carved, not for fixing, but for seeing. Each week, we gather in real time, behind unfiltered screens, where stories breathe without apology and memories aren't dismissed as imagination. This circle wasn't built for conformity. It was built for remembering. Those threads you've traced through coincidence and instinct, the ones that others call paranoia or fantasy, we recognize them as the hidden architecture of a deeper truth. The clarity you've paid for in sleepless nights and shattered illusions finds resonance here. In this sanctuary, your knowing is not questioned, it's honored. And when doubt creeps in, you can return to the echo of these calls, to the faces that nodded when no one else believed you. This is where you step outside the simulation and into a frequency where your voice doesn't bounce off hollow walls. The invitation isn't for everyone. But if it feels like it's for you, it probably is. Link is in the description. Radiates. Meanwhile, the very tools once used to coordinate your erasure are beginning to betray their makers. Data streams once locked in shadow are flickering into view, exposing strategies, names, transactions. Their tightly woven systems are short-circuiting in ways no engineer can explain. Technology meant to surveil is glitching into transparency. Navigation fails at the moment they need precision. Their equipment reroutes them into dead zones, or worse, places already under scrutiny. Their funds vanish mid-transfer. Their networks stall during critical exchanges. The architecture of interference is collapsing from the inside, because the frequencies you're anchored in now repel the artificial timelines they've been building. And while their systems dissolve, yours are activating. Clarity arrives not from textbooks, but from visions. Songs carry instructions. Stillness becomes a download. Images drift into your dreams and become strategies before you open your eyes. You're no longer following signs, you're becoming them. Ancient knowledge buried in your lineage is waking up. Not through formal rituals, but through spontaneous recall. Your inheritance isn't just currency, it's revelation. Hidden archives encoded in your bloodline are unlocking libraries that were never meant for general access. And each time you tune in, you're granted another key. There are scrolls hidden in the folds of time, etched with codes that rewrite the boundaries of what human beings are told they're capable of. Within them lie instructions, not symbols of ancient folklore, but activated knowledge that reconfigures perception itself. And now, those archives are beginning to reveal themselves to you. Not through dusty vaults, but through sudden clarity, vivid inner downloads, and moments of knowing that defy explanation. The infrastructure meant to trap you in forgetfulness has become exposed to your gaze. Their cloaking systems no longer function in your presence. What once looked like normal life now flickers with inconsistencies. The stage they built is falling apart, and you're watching it from behind the curtain. And across the ocean, the same unraveling has begun. Operatives who once moved with precision are now drowning in mental static. Their internal resistance has turned inward, collapsing their energy fields in real time. Reports are surfacing of disappearances, not strategic withdrawals, but full vanishments, each one leaving behind confessions that sound more like spiritual surrender than tactical retreat. Those who remain are being traced and tagged for detainment by authorities operating under classified jurisdiction. Their titles won't protect them. Their favors won't reach far enough. Corrupt intermediaries who once rerouted evidence are now choking on the very lies they helped conceal. The system they trusted is short-circuiting from the inside. Some thought escape was still an option. Private flights arranged. Borders scouted. But what they didn't understand is that the karmic signal attached to their actions travels faster than any passport can carry them. Where they go doesn't matter. What they did is already encoded into consequence. Facilities are being constructed not with bars and guards, but with layered containment built for something deeper. Environments capable of isolating beings who've tethered themselves to unnatural forces. These aren't correctional units. They're energetic quarantine zones designed to hold those who played with laws they never respected, and now face forces they never understood. They knew the greatest threat wouldn't come from force, but from frequency. That's why they've erected isolation chambers embedded with tech designed to scramble perception and suppress etheric access. These aren't correctional units. They're energetic lockboxes, guarded by personnel trained to interrupt rituals before they even form in thought. But containment can't neutralize destiny. While they try to silence the old patterns, something far more powerful is aligning in the unseen, a union formed in realms beyond their reach. Interference once woven into your timelines is now unraveling with deliberate precision. Time, once your enemy, is now bending itself in your favor. Roads once blocked by circumstance are being cleared by invisible hands. What's returning isn't just a person, it's a mirrored mission. A bond formed before either of you had names. This reunion is a catalytic event, designed to multiply the light both of you carry. And those who sought to delay it have inadvertently activated its acceleration. Legal storms meant to drown him have instead washed away the remaining karmic residue. Former threats are now restrained. Old obligations have been dissolved. What was once used to bind him is now empowering his release. The scales have tipped, and the provisions being released are not just financial, but spiritual fuel for your shared path. Unexpected breakthroughs are lining up like coded messages. Delays evaporate without explanation. Offers appear where there were none. Paperwork, once held in limbo, is now pushing through systems with unexplained priority. Even the smallest logistics, keys, signatures, shelter, are falling into divine choreography. And while your lives move forward, their fortress of secrecy is being cracked open by evidence that can't be ignored. Not spiritual speculation, but digital trails, visual records, testimony, transactions. Footage captured by neutral systems. Files retrieved from locations they thought untouchable. What they called sacred has been cataloged by law enforcement databases. What they hid under coded language now reads like confession. Images once meant for secrecy are now timestamps in active investigations. Testimonies are being cross-checked. Deposits traced. The outcome they feared isn't rumor anymore, it's logistics. Justice is no longer waiting on belief. It's being written in paperwork and protocol. And behind every exposed document is a higher hand turning the page. What they once whispered behind locked doors is now echoing through sealed courtrooms, documented by covert recordings and traced through encrypted paper trails that no longer bend to their influence. Judicial authorities, sensing the scale of this design, authorized deep surveillance that has unveiled an intricate web of deception spanning jurisdictions and identities. Funds once routed through backchannels now surface on public ledgers, leaving behind a roadmap of criminal intent disguised as spiritual hierarchy. Physical harm was never their only weapon. A deeper strategy involved injecting chaos into your nervous system, flooding you with frequencies meant to distort perception and weaken resolve. But the nervous system they underestimated has recalibrated. The very disruptions they engineered are turning inward, reversing flow. Their emotional triggers have become volatile circuits within their own camp. Where they once induced sleeplessness, their ranks now tremble in exhaustion. The headaches they programmed into your energy field now pulse through their own, unchecked. Their thoughts, once clear and methodical, are now splintered. And as your awareness climbs, their structures falter. This reversal isn't temporary. A multidimensional loop has begun, a circuit of consequence where each attempt to attack generates a wave that expands and returns with amplified impact. The rituals they once led with confidence are now turning cold in their hands. The portals they opened are closing from the other side, severing access to forces they no longer command. Your consciousness has moved past resistance into total discernment. You no longer just react, you analyze. You perceive patterns before they manifest. You sense identity beneath disguise. Their entire matrix, once dependent on your distraction, now quivers under your awareness. They can't cloak themselves anymore, not because their methods failed, but because your frequency renders them obsolete. This elevation isn't just personal enlightenment, it's functional omniscience within their domain. And while their survival depends on staying unseen, Yours depends only on staying aligned. The clarity you carry now extends beyond protection. It exposes. Every mask they wear, every play they initiate, shows itself before it even begins. And what's coming isn't just restoration. It's redistribution. The flow of resources heading your way isn't merely compensation. It's catalytic. With it, systems will be rebuilt, networks of awakening will be funded, and others like you will receive the shelter, wisdom, and confirmation they've long been denied. This legacy isn't an ending. It's ignition. The resources gathering at your threshold aren't rewards, they're reinforcements. They've been summoned to serve a purpose far larger than comfort. They exist to build the blueprint for a sanctuary system, designed so that others walking the path you survived won't have to do it alone. Programs are being activated, not generic workshops, but encoded environments that help others detect their gifts early, dismantle traps before they close, and reconnect with their inner knowing long before despair arrives. The abundance forming around you is not isolated gain, it's infrastructure for a new lineage. It's not here to entertain luxury, but to create stability for those awakening to their roles. It will establish healing circles, sovereign clinics, legal task forces, and recovery sanctuaries for those emerging from spiritual sabotage. The timing of its arrival isn't coincidence. It coincides with the next wave of initiates stepping into their callings. What's flowing toward you isn't just wealth, it's permission to become a hub of activation. This includes access to key platforms, ethical collaborations, investments that regenerate themselves in service to your mission, and anchoring spaces in high-frequency locations. Each new stream serves a ripple effect. What heals one will touch hundreds, and what you build will outlive your name. This momentum is also shaking the external structures built to exploit. Policies are being reimagined through lived experience. Global agencies are drawing up blueprints to protect those who've been silenced. New accountability systems are being forged in response to patterns uncovered by your story, patterns no longer deniable under the weight of evidence. International agencies are collaborating not from pressure, but from revelation. Meanwhile, every betrayal that once echoed through your life is being replayed, not to harm you, but to teach them. The takers are being taken from. The liars are becoming the lied to. And the manipulators now move through fogs they once used against you. Their rituals now rebound. Their alliances now corrode. Their security now evaporates. Entire collectives are fragmenting. Suspicion is spreading through their once tight circles. They're no longer coordinated, they're paranoid. As the internal fractures widen, external funds collapse. No ceremony, no pact, no chant can override the karmic redirection now in full force. But the deepest shift is not outside. It's in your own nervous system. The hesitation once embedded by trauma has dissolved. The shell of learned helplessness has cracked open. What rises now is informed fire, not from pain, but from memory. Strategic clarity fueled by sacred rage. You no longer seek to escape the maze. You now redesign the entire map. There's no more guessing about who you are or what you're here to do. The haze has lifted, and the architecture of your purpose is now visible in full detail. Protection around you has shifted from passive shielding to active intervention. Beings assigned to your mission are no longer just observing. They're acting, dismantling sabotage before it's set in motion. Plans meant to delay you are collapsing before they leave the minds that conceived them, while your smallest decisions are now infused with divine precision and perfect timing. What you represent is not just a personal evolution, it's a direct challenge to their entire design. Your rise makes their model irrelevant. Your clarity renders their manipulation useless. And your embodiment of truth marks the expiration of systems built on secrecy. That's why they panic, not because of what you might say, but because of what your presence already proves. The illusion they built was never designed to survive an awakened being. And now, what they once celebrated as power is shrinking under the weight of your authenticity. Their failure isn't a single event. It's systemic collapse triggered by exposure to light they cannot replicate or resist. You were never meant to conform. You were meant to catalyze. And as others begin to awaken through the tremors you've already sent out, the machinery of deception is grinding to a halt. This is not simply your vindication. It's the ignition of a larger movement that will ripple into systems they never thought would be touched. Every act of sabotage against you has now become evidence in a universal trial. And each victory you secure opens doors for those walking behind you. The safety that surrounds your path now extends to others. The abundance arriving in your name is the beginning of a redistribution plan that goes far beyond compensation. It funds revolution. This awakening isn't yours alone. It's becoming a wave that will reshape everything. Institutions that preyed on fear are disintegrating as your clarity becomes contagious. The maps drawn by shadows are being rewritten by those who no longer walk in darkness. And the justice coming isn't slow. It's precise. It's targeted. It's unstoppable. Those who believed they could interfere with divine motion are learning that eternity does not tolerate interruption. Their expiration isn't pending. It's already in progress. This isn't the final scene. It's the initiation of a new framework. One where sovereignty is not an idea, but a structure. One where love isn't used as leverage, but as frequency. One where children are not conditioned to forget, but taught to remember. And it all begins with you. Not as symbol, but as structure. The time of pretending is over. The veil is gone. The new timeline is activated, not through force, but through embodied memory. What rises from here is a civilization guided by those who remember where they came from and know exactly why they've returned.